Alrighty, hello again, everybody. Did everybody get food? Did anybody not get food? If so, now's the time to get your food quietly. Alrighty, so we're going to start now. So it is my pleasure to introduce Melody Kramer, founder and CEO of Legal Greenhouse and Kramer Law Office. Melody is an award-winning author, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur with decades of experience in everything from criminal law to complex business litigation, even working on cases connected to the U.S. Supreme Court. She's known for being a fearless advocate, an innovative thinker, and a leader grounded in integrity. She's also launching her new book, which you can check out in the back afterwards, called My Turtle Journal, a daily momentum journal for walking through tough times. Today, she will be speaking on courageous leadership in tumultuous times, sharing how we can lead with courage, humility, purpose, in a chaotic world. So please join me in welcoming Melody Kramer.
Figure out the right way with this microphone. Thank you, everyone, and it is a pleasure to be back at Union College. This auditorium looks nicer and repainted from when I was here. Looks very nice. Are you okay with the microphone? We good?
Can you look at that, Matthew?
Hold it closer?
Yes.
Okay. I don't like having a microphone in my face. Despite my obvious appearances here, I am introvert, so I don't want to stand in front of the crowd. But here's the thing about leadership. Sometimes you have to stand up front. So I was really excited to come and talk to you all today. I got to sit in some sessions upstairs as well. This is such an auspicious time to talk about leadership. I think all of you, in one way or another, can acknowledge that solid, principled, courageous leadership is in short supply these days. It's not that it's gone, it's in short supply. But I do have faith in seeing all the people that are here today and all the young people here today that we have new leaders in the making, and that giving you some skills and some insight will help sort of speed your process into your leadership role, whatever that may be in life. So this afternoon, what I wanted to talk about is more of an overview of what leadership looks like in its various different forms. It's not the same for everyone. Everyone has some sort of different skill, ability, interest, and way that they can lead in the world. And I'm hoping you walk away with some tools to find your place in the world and then embrace that. In preparing for this, I started thinking about, at your age, in my early 20s, what would I have looked at in terms of what a good leader even looked like? Because I hadn't had much experience in that other than the small little circle I had grown up with. And for those of you who know me, I grew up in a small, very conservative offshoot of the Adventist church. And so my big example of a leader, at least what I thought, was my dad, who was a pastor, first of a local church, and then moved on to higher levels of leadership within the church. And I was fortunate to have that example. I got to see someone who was based in faith and moral certainty, and who guided people to help them be their better selves and closer to God. By watching him, I understood a little bit about what it meant to be a leader in the church, local church, and then at higher organizational levels, not all the same thing. I got to see the pros. People looked up to you, thought you knew things, thought you could solve problems, thought your family was special. I loved in your speech today, you were talking about, I can stand up here and take questions, I can't answer them all. And I saw my dad in the same way. There were also the cons. Being a leader is not always easy. Sometimes you have to make tough choices. You get judged for every choice that you make, every choice that your family members make. I tried to be the good one. My older brother, not so much. But you're in the under a microscope all the time. It involves a lot of sacrifice, including time with family. My father traveled a lot, first in the US and in Canada. We lived in Canada for part that time. And by the time I was a teenager, he was traveling around the world speaking, and he still did that on many occasions until he retired, even after his retirement. What I didn't realize was at the same time I was seeing leadership from my father, who is a public leader, if you will, I was also seeing the quiet type of leadership from my mother, the consummate pastor's wife, who is there to make her husband look good, proofread everything that he wrote, help him with his sermons, and help him interact with parishioners that maybe he wasn't the best fit for. Sometimes women who had been through some trauma, my mom could relate with them where my father could not. I didn't realize until many years later that was a form of leadership that I hadn't acknowledged. So I started to wonder, why do we have this crisis in leadership right now? What has happened between when I was growing up and what we're seeing now? And I realize it's not just a matter of I'm a little older and wiser and want to look back favorably to the past, which we're all prone to do at some point. It's not that. The world has changed. The world has changed around us, and the world has changed in how we choose leaders on all different levels. Who we choose to follow has been influenced by technology in ways that we really haven't wrapped our heads around at all. We as a society have allowed drama and outrage to drive attention to derive power and wealth. And then it is this perpetual circle of those who are leading don't have much moral accountability because they weren't chosen for those skills and abilities. When you look at so many politicians, the ones that you can see are principled, that really have a core moral center, don't get elected to office because they're not outrageous. They're not saying crazy things. So they don't get the attention, and then they don't get elected. We also have to, and this would be a topic all in of itself, but the involvement in social media, not just by ourselves, but everyone around us, has pushed us in a place where we constantly feel that we need to register an emotion towards everything that we do. And then bots are collecting this information and feeding us what we want to hear, pushing us in ways that they want us to go. How are you going to find good, solid leaders in that environment? And that brings us around to the Instagram egg. How many of you are familiar with the Instagram egg? Oh, only a few. Wow, okay. So I'm not even sure who started it, but you know, you're familiar with Instagram, right? Okay. Not just the 20-year-olds, but the other one, everyone else. So some years ago, someone decided to do a little experiment. And they created an account that was just an egg. There were no posts, there was nothing, no bio, no nothing. And they wanted to see how many likes they could get. 24 hours, they had 33 million likes. Not by doing anything, not by being anything, not contributing anything positive to the world, but by being a social experiment in, let's admit it, how gullible we all are. 33 million Americans, that is, someone check my math, isn't that 10% of the US population, followed an egg on Instagram? What are we, nuts? I mean, we need to adjust how we define leadership and who we choose to follow. And again, even, are some of you abstainers from social media totally? Nobody. I was going to say, even if you abstain, everyone around you is involved in it, so it's hard to, get out of that. But I don't want to focus today just on bad examples of leadership. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that." And I would add, poor leadership cannot drive out bad leadership. Only courageous, principled leadership can do that. Thank you. So let's move on to talk about the types of leaders and what leaders do. And then I'm going to talk about the biggest pitfall. I had a whole list, but time. So we'll only talk about the biggest one. And then 4 core traits for courageous leaders, things that I hope you will emulate as you go to your leadership position in the world. So as I alluded to before, one of the different types of leaders is public versus private or quiet leadership. Public are the people that are out in front. You see them all the time. In the church setting, it's the pastors, it's the Sabbath school leadership, it's all those people that are up in front all the time. Politicians, lawyers, judges, business leaders. It's an important role, but it's one that not everyone wants or can do. And that's okay, because they're the private, quiet ones in the background that can literally change the world. Again, I already talked about my mother, who is very much a quiet leader in that way, but I have another one to just sort of share, which was very personal to me. My cousin Sandy passed away last year. She was 52 and she died of cancer. The last time I talked with her before she passed, we were actually standing by the gravesite of my aunt and talking about how beautiful the service was. And Sandy commented to me, "I don't know what we're going to do when my parents pass away, because none of us, she or her 3 siblings, like to stand up in public and speak." That is a little dilemma. You're planning on your parents' demise and not sure who's going to speak. So I volunteered to speak. Little did I realize that a year later she would have passed herself. What was so ironic about her funeral, and I talked with her husband and her 3 sons. She left behind 3 sons, and I told them about the conversation, and I said, "If you want me to speak at her funeral, anything, read a poem, whatever you want, let me know." And they said yes, and what they had me do was read one of her writings that she had done several months before she passed. And I got to the funeral location, and I was there early, sat in the front row, and didn't really pay attention to what was going on behind me or who was coming in. And by the time it was my turn to get up and speak, this lovely journal entry she had from a visit to a hospital, actually. She and her husband, Christian, had gone trying to be able to get some fluid drained off her abdomen. She was in, serious last stages of cancer and had like 3 liters of fluid, extra fluid in her body. They weren't able to help her out, but they were able to have a wonderful conversation about faith and about hope and about the fact that she was a 2%er. She'd been diagnosed 5 years before with cancer. Her doctors had recommended palliative care, and she's like, "I want to live." And she was trying everything she could to do that. And before they left the ER, she and her husband Christian, and ironically, Dr. Angel, didn't make that up, had a prayer together. And as she walked out of the emergency room, sorry, tear up a little bit. As she walked out of the emergency room, she reflected on how she still had things to do. And here is my cousin, who would never in a million years do something like this. And when I stood up to read her words, her sermon, if you will, there were over 300 people that were at her funeral. She was just a simple, shy teacher at a small Christian school. And yet she had the ability in her absence to provide something so positive to the world. Some of us are those quiet leaders. You don't have to stand up front. That's only one thing. That's only one way. There are many others. Now, the third way that I'm still trying to wrap my head around, and I'm welcome to hear any insights any of you have, but I think there's kind of a hybrid one too. And those are the ones, and Eric was talking about he's got a podcast. I do some blogging. There's a hybrid public-private sort of leadership where people are putting their ideas, their thoughts, positive things into the world through technology. They may never be standing up in front of people, but those also have the ability to convince people to do things, to not do things. It's a very powerful force that we need to reckon with and harness for good, because it can be used for both. As for me and my blogging that I do, so many times I'm like, it's too much of a hassle. I'm not going to do it anymore. And then, and it happened this morning, I go and travel, and people come up to me and say, I love what you write about. It makes me think. I appreciate your approach. It's very helpful for me. And so I keep doing it. It doesn't make me any money, but it's one positive way that I can contribute to the world. You probably have ways like this that you're already doing. Are there any of you that do blogging or podcasts? Okay. Anyone else? This is one of those things. Technology is around. We had an AI session this morning. Don't dismiss that as being a positive tool if used the right way. Going back to the types of leaders, there are a couple other distinctions that I think are useful to have. There are what I call the maintainers. Those are the people who keep systems and structures in place. They are the train conductors, the school principals, Sabbath school leaders, people who keep the infrastructure of our society intact. Very useful, very helpful. And then there are some of us, outliers or challengers, the ones who sort of sit on the outside and say, well, that's all well and good, but have you thought about this? What about that? Maybe you should look at that. There's a place for both of those. See where you fit better, because I bet as you sit there, you have an idea of, oh yeah, I'm one of those. Just let me follow the rules, the structure. I'm good at that. And others like, yeah, I never liked the rules. Never wanted to follow them. I want to be the outside thinker. Apologies, I missed a page. And then there's one other sort of distinction that I think is important to look at, and that is they're the natural born leaders. The ones who, organized their daycare class. The ones who had a little clubhouse out in the backyard. The one who ran for student council. All of the ones who just naturally seem to gravitate toward a leadership position. That's a small proportion of people, but it is not everyone. There are also reluctant leaders. I'm one of those. I did not pitch to speak here today. I was asked. I've been on the boards of 4 nonprofits. I didn't ask. Someone came and said, hey, will you do it? I was on jury duty, and they made me foreperson. I don't know why. But reluctant leaders, don't worry about it. It's another role. You don't have to go seek out the leadership position. Sometimes it comes and finds you. And sometimes it finds you in ways you didn't like or don't want. And that's the accidental leader. And when I thought about this, a couple of examples, there are many, many, but a couple examples came to mind. John Walsh. Anyone heard of John Walsh? He became an advocate for victims of violent crimes after his young son had been murdered. He didn't ask for that. He didn't want that. If he could change things, he would. But he was put in a position where he could have profound influence and really make a difference. Rosa Parks. She had a tough day at work. I don't know what she did, house cleaning, whatever it was, tough day at work. She sat down. Accidental leader, we all know who she is. And then my favorite story, of course, is from the Bible of Queen Esther. Think about it. Esther was born into a poor family, and she was involuntarily put in a beauty pageant. And she won the beauty pageant, and that was disconcerting enough. And then shortly thereafter, she gets asked to risk her life to go into the king and stop a genocide. And she did. She never set out to be a leader, but she became one. We already talked a little bit about what leaders do, whether they're keeping the machinery of things going, whether they're on the outside looking in, but I wanted to take a look at examples of Christ and how he demonstrated leadership, because it gives us some of those additional categories of things that leaders do. And the first one I noticed was pedestrian helpfulness. Look at Jesus' first miracle, turning water into wine. It's not some big esoteric thing. He helped out the hostess of a party. It's a good thing. It's a piece of leadership. Healing the lepers really didn't affect anybody but the lepers, right? And only one of them even came back and thanked him. Still a piece of leadership. Loaves and the fishes. Everyone was hungry. Helped out with that. Sometimes being a leader is pretty simple. Don't overthink it. Something else that Jesus did in spades was acknowledging and building up the lesser, the disenfranchised, and the persecuted. Sermon on the Mount talked about this all over the place. The woman at the well, he didn't shun her, he talked with her. The woman being stoned, he didn't pick up stones. He sat down and added some perspective there in the sand. He added perspective to the whole thing. He accepted people where they were. And I love the story about, one was the faith of the mustard seed. He was okay with that. You've got a tiny little bit of faith, fine, I can work with that. When Mary washed Jesus' feet with expensive perfume, and the disciples were saying, well, she should have done something else. She should have sold that and given the money to the poor. And Jesus, just let her. It's good. It's all fine. And then there was that one example, and I was looking back at the biblical reference, and it's just 2 verses, and it's very short. But, he did snap and toss some tables. And being a leader sometimes involves tossing tables. Don't be afraid of it. Don't shy away from it. Just realize that's not usually what you need to do. But don't be afraid to do it. And this came back to one core principle I think we all need to remember. Jesus never told his followers to hate anyone, to hurt anyone, or to fear anyone. And if any of you have an example contrary to that, feel free to tell me. But I could find no examples of that. And if we are going to be leaders with any sort of Christian moral compass, that we need to remember. Post it up on your mirror. Put it in your day planner, whatever it is, and remember that ultimate example. There's someone that I follow on Substack, has some really wonderful things to say, and the other day he posted this. You can't look at the cross and conclude that God wants us to seize the levers of state power to dominate our neighbors. Christ's kingship is revealed in the agonizing surrender of power, not the hoarding of it. A faith that demands cultural dominance has completely forgotten how our own Savior died. So getting your head around the fact that being a leader and being a leader when you are a Christian is different than what it looks like in the rest of the world. It is not about climbing to the top of the mountain and pushing everybody aside. It's not that. Never has been that. Anybody can be a leader of something, but it's not always to a good place. Remember the Pied Piper? He led the children off to some horrible fate. Was he a leader? Well, sure he was. Is he a leader we want to emulate? Absolutely not. And I think as Christians, we need to be especially careful when we are following people as well, whether we're the leader in the situation or a follower, to not just look at whether people say I'm a Christian, but look at the substance of what they're doing, always, always. When you look at leadership in a polarized world, which we have right now, well, whether it's the polarized world we have now or earlier, you go through basic steps of running meetings, standing up, speaking places, placing votes, things that aren't life or death decisions for anyone involved. But sometimes difficult decisions are made. And somehow you need to tap into what your core is before those things happen. Leadership that counts happens when the stakes are high and when you may have to take a difficult stand and it may cost you something. Don't shy away from it. It's part of being a leader. If your mode of decision making is to just check how the wind is blowing and vote accordingly, you're not a leader. You're a follower. A follower with power, perhaps. A follower, perhaps, with your own following, but not a leader. A courageous leader, a principled leader, takes responsibility for their actions, even bad consequences, and restrains themselves from gloating if the outcome is good. So let me talk about the biggest pitfall of leadership, and that is thinking it's about you. It's not about you. It just isn't. It's about who you serve, who you are following, who you are inspiring. And I sat in on several of the sessions today, and I got that sense from every speaker. It's not about them. They're here to present some information. They're here to inspire. They're here to educate and inform. But it's not about them. It's about the substance of what you are conveying and putting out in the world. And I really wanted to demonstrate this in a way that you probably won't expect. I love this quote from a former president, and it may take you a little while to know who it is. Let me read this. This was from a very famous speech. The interests of the nation must always come before any interests of self-consideration. As president, I must put the interests of America first. America needs a full-time president and a full-time Congress, particularly at this time of problems here and abroad. To continue to fight then the months ahead for my personal vindication would almost totally absorb the time and attention of both the President and Congress in a period when our entire focus should be on the great issues of peace abroad and prosperity without inflation at home. Therefore, I resign the presidency. Richard Nixon, his resignation speech. And as much as I thought I didn't like Richard Nixon, when I read his speech, I realized this was a speech of a true leader. It may have been just a moment in time that he was a true leader, but I'll take it. I'll take it. So what are those 4 traits that I said should be something that you aspire to in your leadership role, whatever that leadership role is? We've allowed the voices of fear and hatred to drown out the still small voices of our better angels. But we don't need to let that continue. So here are the 4 core traits. Constant curiosity, measured flexibility, radical kindness, which is a lot harder than you think, courage to stand up for what is right. Albert Einstein said, "The mind that opens to a new idea never returns to its original size." And I would add, a little discomfort stimulates growth. And if you can bear even more discomfort, you will grow even more. Some years ago, a friend shared a paradigm with me, and she said when she encounters a new or unexpected idea or emotion, her reaction now is, that's interesting. For her, it was a way to stop sort of negative self-talk, but I looked at that and I'm like, wow, that is great. I need to do that when I encounter other people, other cultures, other religions, other whatever. My initial response should be, that's interesting. I don't need to adopt that other thing, but thinking about it, there's nothing bad about thinking about it. If you've grown up Adventist, you've probably grown up in kind of a sheltered bubble, right? You're surrounded mostly about other Adventists. They all say the same things. They all know what haystacks are. All of that. Got to have one of those again. I'm missing the haystacks. But as you go out in the world, and some of you may go in leadership roles within the church organizations, that's fine. But some of you are going to go out in the real world, permit me to call it that, and you're going to interact with people that are different than you. And being able to be curious about that, you don't have to change your core beliefs. It might change some things, you don't know. But it's worthwhile to do that. And again, I'd talk again about social media real quick. We've been programmed now for the last number of years with Facebook and Instagram and all those to like or dislike anything we see immediately. And in my humble opinion, it screwed up our brains. We've forgotten how to stop and say, that's interesting. I don't know if it's good or bad yet. I got to think about it. Maybe do some more research. I don't know. So that's important. Look for new perspectives. Now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to tell this little story, but I think I'm going to anyway. I have done this before. I loved, by the way, Eric's, in his speech, he asked who wanted to be richer when they left. How was that, richer when they left the seminar than when they got in? I was one of the ones who raised my hand. By the way, you owe me a nickel. And he came out and started passing out nickels. I'm like, wow, he's right. Everyone has to be richer, they're richer. It's easy. It really changed my perspective. Made me think about it. But this is a little example from, I don't know, several decades ago. I had been invited to lead Sabbath school class, young adult Sabbath school class here. And the topic of the day was Peter and his vision. You remember Peter's vision? He's napping on the roof, falls asleep, waiting for lunch. And the sheet comes down with all these unclean animals and birds. And the voice from heaven says, "Arise, kill, and eat." And he's like, no, I've never done that. I've never broken the rules. I've never done that. He did not do let's think about it. This happened 3 times. Clearly something very important was being conveyed to him. And the traditional, what we've been taught, it helped open his mind to witness to Gentiles that they also could be followers of Christ. But anyone who knows me would know that I couldn't just have a simple little presentation. I had to do a little show and tell in the process. And I think Eric and Jellery were probably there when this happened. So we used to have potluck at the beginning there. And I decided I was going to bring a plate with some slices of ham on it. And when no one was looking, I put that in with a mix of the hummus and whatever else was there. And then I sat back and I watched. I watched how people reacted to this new and foreign thing. And there were some that are like, well, it must be veggie ham because, we're here at Union College and we don't. And others were like, maybe some visitor came and brought it. It has to be that. And at a certain point, whoever one of the other leaders was kind of snuck it under the table. Like, we don't want to see it. Nobody ate any. And that wasn't the point. My point was not to have anyone eat ham that didn't want to eat ham. I didn't want to either. It kind of grossed me out. But the point was, if you can put yourself in a position where you can think about things from a different angle, it's mind-blowing. I don't know how many of you follow the Far Side cartoons. I don't know if those are still, aren't they great? Nobody, oh, okay, we got a few. I don't know if they're still being published. Anyway, but Far Side always takes a different angle, a different perspective. And if you're a writer, just a different point of view, different POV. Do that with whatever is coming your way. Stop and take a minute and look at it from a different perspective. Number 2 is measured flexibility. Again, when you see new things and new ideas, nobody should be forcing you to change your own thoughts. You need to do that on your own time, in your own way, and you will grow and change over time. Change is good. Maturing your thoughts and your views on things is good. In our current polarized world, and of course, social media doesn't help, but things are viewed as black and white, us versus them, right versus wrong, and compromise is phrased as weakness. Compromise is not weakness. In fact, it's the only way a democracy runs. You gotta have some compromise. And it's the same thing for families, within families. Spouses, if you don't have some compromise, you're not gonna last. Workplaces, same thing. You gotta have some flexibility in there. Life is more nuanced than that. It's really important to differentiate between these are my principles, my moral center, that govern my life and what I do, versus what things I can or should impose or try to impose on other people. These are not the same things. And you will find that out in a hurry if you are a leader in a business organization and you get sued for religious discrimination because you told all your employees that they must come to church on Sabbath. You're gonna find out in a hurry. I've done some work co-counseling with Church State Council on religious discrimination cases. Did one recently. And the core there was one person in the office didn't like hearing about Christianity. And the boss told our client, well, you can't talk about your Christian faith. You can't talk about it in the office. And we students said, yeah, that's not how it works. Our client can't force him to do anything, but they can talk about it as much as he can talk about football or whatever he wants to talk about. It's about allowing other people some space and some room for their beliefs. Don't push it on them, but you have some rights as well. On that measured flexibility thing, I know growing up, I was very much given this fear of Eastern religions, yoga, anything that had to do with Eastern anything. I think historically it had to do with the church, the Catholic Church dividing between East and West many, many years ago, as you had it in history class. But whatever, always had that fear of that. So a few years back, and I'm a trial lawyer, I decided I wanted to take some martial arts. And I took a Taekwondo class. And I walked in there thinking, I need to be really careful, because if there's any of this woo-woo Eastern philosophy thing, I need to go, run away and whatever. What surprised me, again, curiosity plus measured flexibility, the first day I was introduced to the 5 tenets of Taekwondo. Has anyone here done Taekwondo? Nobody? Okay. We have one, yay. Courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, indomitable spirit. I can work with that. Does not conflict with my Christian beliefs in the slightest, doesn't conflict with Adventist beliefs in the slightest. And what I like about it is the 10 Commandments, most of them are prohibitory. Don't do this. Don't kill anyone. Check, I haven't. Other than that fatal car accident, nothing, I'm good. Those are easy. But this, I can spend my lifetime working on this. So anyway, work with those things and realize that the world is not as black and white as you would think. Another way I've done this when I've had employees, and also if you look at my turtle journal there, if you have a chance to look at that later, I created something I call Donkey Relaxation Day. And those of you who follow me on Facebook know what this is. It's just a different version of Sabbath observance, or someone, or someday being special, taken away from everything else. In the Bible, there's several places where Jesus referred to give your donkeys a rest too on the Sabbath, right? Sorry, I don't have the verse in front of me, but I can give that to you later if you want it. Grab my card, send me an email, and I will send you the quote, and I'll send you the picture I put up on Facebook on Friday afternoons. Again, this is a way of saying, I've got something that I found works well for me for religious purposes, but you may do it for another purpose. You don't have to agree with everything, but you can agree that having one day off from your regular things will make you clear mentally and emotionally. So it might be something to do. Now we get to radical kindness, which is not easy. Sometimes it is, but not always. It's the result of a heart in tune with humanity and focused on doing good, even when the recipient of your kind acts cannot return it. Perhaps when the recipient doesn't even know what you did, doesn't judge as to why they need help in the first place, and it can be directed towards people that you firmly disagree with. Again, Jesus never told us to hate anyone, hurt anyone, or fear anyone. Some years ago, I was working in a very heated patent infringement case, and we were up against one of the most notorious law firms in this area of the law. And it had been miserable for a year. I had gotten abusive emails and phone calls on a daily basis for a year. It was horrible. I don't like to say I hate people, but I really was not fond of opposing counsel. Let's put it that way. I remember one day I took my daughter to Sabbath school, and I had to step out and just kind of had an emotional breakdown from the last round of interacting with this person. But we needed to settle the case, and I needed to start those communications somehow. So I pulled out a well-worn book on my shelf that's called How to Deal with People You Can't Stand. Thought, this is perfect. I need this. Surely this can help me. So they have in that book, which I highly recommend you getting, it kind of pegs people in sort of different boxes of how they interact with the world and what they're looking for when you're trying to get them to something. And this one, as I kind of processed through it, I realized this man needed affirmation and acknowledgement. I don't want to acknowledge anything he's done. Are you crazy? He's nuts. But, what do I have to lose? So let me give this a try. What I realized was, in the process, I could see the person who hurt me with new eyes. His father was a famous, notorious patent attorney. In fact, he's the original patent troll, if you've heard that reference before. His brother and uncle were also attorneys at the same firm. And I realized that pressure to keep up with that had to be overwhelming. And I thought, I bet no one took him aside and said, hey, good job. Nobody. So I decided if I couched my approach to him in compassion instead of the anger that I felt, maybe it would make a difference. And it was so painful to do, I cannot even describe. I did not want to do it, but I did. I didn't want to say anything nice, but I did acknowledge that he was working hard for his clients, which he was. He was working hard. What surprised me was it worked. It worked. It opened the lines of communication, and about 6 months later, we settled the case. Radical kindness means you step out of your box and you try to do something good even when the person absolutely does not deserve it. And you will grow in ways that you never imagined possible. The last one is courage to stand up, which is also very hard. The courage to stand up for the right thing no matter the consequence is the most important characteristic of a leader. And I'm not talking about having your talking points and you talk to people who agree with you anyway. I'm talking about the times when you see injustice and cruelty right in front of you and there's something you can do about it. Don't freeze. Don't stand still, do something. You may do it wrong. I'm not going to say you always get it right. But you need to do something. And I have one example where I didn't, which I regret to this day. I have one longer example. I'll leave that because we're getting short on time. But I was living here in Lincoln at the time, and I was out jogging along Highway 2. There's a pathway along there. And as I came up to the intersection, I saw two guys, one had a baseball bat, and they were assaulting a driver of a car who was stopped at the light. And I didn't know what to do. I was horrified at what I was watching. I didn't have a cell phone. The closest phone anywhere probably would have been at least a 10-minute run away. I didn't know what to do. I froze. And I saw this happening. And it made me so angry later on that I didn't intervene and do something, because I may have helped avoid some injury to this person. Fortunately, they were arrested. There was prosecution later on. I called when I got home. And then years later, I took classes that actually helped give me things to do in those circumstances. So even if you screw up, tomorrow's another day. Do better. And then this is another thing that happened around that same time. After that incident, I was at Quick Shop getting some gas, and I was a newly minted attorney. I've been working in criminal law, and I'm looking and I see this group of huddled teenagers over here, and I see them walking up to one of the other drivers who's getting gas, clearly a stranger to them, and I see them talking and handing him some money. I'm like, this looks a little curious. So I followed, and sure enough, he goes straight back to where the beer is. And he gets a couple, 12 packs of beer, and he walks up to the counter. And here I am. I'm an officer of the court. I'm a sworn attorney of law. I'm an officer of the court, and I'm seeing procuring it for a minor happening right in front of me. And it's easy to just say, pretend you didn't see it. Maybe the clerk will catch it, maybe they'll notice, I don't know. But the clerk was busy, he didn't know, he didn't see what I saw. But speaking up in public like that, a little daunting. But I did it. I screwed up my courage because I didn't want to repeat what I'd done the other day. I screwed up my courage and I told the clerk, he's procuring for those teenagers out there. So the clerk looked up, saw them, and wouldn't do the sale. Saved him from a criminal charge too. Practice in the little things. There's nothing hugely at stake there. I mean, nothing bad was going to happen to me whichever way I went. But do it anyway. It gave me practice daily in doing that. And then years later, 2016, I was approached about taking on a very contentious legal battle that would have national and international implications, still does. And I didn't have experience in that area of the law. I've never done that area of the law before. But all of the large law firms that had the people who could do this, who had the expertise, who had the experience, wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it because they were scared that maybe one of their clients would be upset, might take business from them, so they wouldn't do it. So I had to stand up, and I will admit it's scary. We even got a death threat. And I got to say, don't recommend that. Not fun. In fact, one of the other people with that project we were working on got a lot of threats against his family as well. But he doesn't regret standing up, and I don't regret standing up. It's the times that you don't that will haunt you for the rest of your life. So step up. And again, I am not talking about, and I can't stress this enough, we're not talking about anything that involves forcing your beliefs on other people. We're talking about justice and cruelty to others. We're at a crossroads in our country right now. And I understand that as I stand here in front of you, you have different political beliefs. You have different views about everything, and I understand that. But in the interest of what I have just said about standing up, about not remaining silent, I want to pose a couple questions to you for your thought as you leave. We have unarmed, defenseless civilians being rounded up on streets and being held in inhumane conditions. As followers of Christ, should we remain silent? We have American citizens being shot in the street for standing up and protesting those actions. As fellow Americans, should we remain silent? And just a few days ago, a man with access to nuclear weapons threatened to commit genocide. A whole civilization will die tonight. Are we obligated to speak up, to do something? All that is required for evil to prosper is for good men and women to do nothing. Don't be a do-nothing person. What you do is going to depend on various things. The type of leader you are, the type of leadership position you may be in. But whatever your sphere of influence is, use it. Use it for good in the world. We talked earlier about Esther, who again is just an amazing example of someone who stood up and did something for good because it was presented to her. And in conclusion, and forgive me, but I'm quoting from Veggie Tales, but you'll get the point here. A wise man once said, not to be afraid of greatness. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. So I don't know where you are in that, but I hope you will take that and find your greatness and go work on it. And that's all I have, except for questions and answers. Do we have any questions? Nobody has questions? Surely someone has questions. There we go.
The title said something about legal greenhouse. Did I miss that? What does that mean?
Interesting you asked that, because I keep getting emails related to actual greenhouses and to cannabis law. No, Legal Greenhouse was a company I formed. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do with it at the time. It was sort of inspired by my surroundings in my office. It was a really neat office with all the greenery and the rain that came down through the ceiling. It was cool. But the point is, with all my years as being a lawyer and seeing so many problems in the legal profession, I wanted to be a force for positive change. Change in how lawyers interact with their clients, how lawyers interact with the rest of the world. And I wanted to, I'm on a quest to make lawyers useful again, or at least humorous. So I've got a Dr. Seuss parody book up there. That's the humorous one, talking about the silliness of cannabis law. Not advocating use, just to be clear. So yeah, that's what that is about. So. Anyone else? Oh, thank you for asking. Yes, I'm so excited about this. Hasn't even officially launched, and yet I keep giving people copies going, this is cool. So my turtle journal was born out of a couple things. One is I had a really crappy year, and I had these big plans. I had great business plans at the beginning of the year, and they just didn't come together. Nothing came together as planned. But by the end of the year, and I was kind of summarizing, what have I done this year? What have I accomplished? And I realized that I actually had accomplished things. Not the big plans I had, but some of the other ones that I sort of had. And I realized that one small step at a time gets you places. And I had been introduced to this idea of a daily momentum journal from Alex Sharfin, who's a pretty well-known speaker in this area. And I had made an adaptation of his journal. And it's every day, I've got my 2 pages, and I write down my stuff. What am I grateful for? What do I want to accomplish today? What are my top 3 tasks? What's my frog task, the one I really don't want to do? And then recording wins. And what do I need help with? And I have found how helpful that has been. And then I also had friends who were going through divorces, through loss of job, different things like that, and realized there are a lot of coaches, people out there that can help you make big goals and big plans. But there aren't so many that meet you where you can barely get your feet out of bed in the morning. And if you can do that and take little steps every day in the right direction, you're going to get things done. And so that's one that helps you do that. Thank you for asking. And if you're interested in it, grab a card, email me, and I'll let you know when it's actually available. Like I said, it's just sort of in pre-launch right now. Yes?
Yeah, so in this day and age where good leadership, courageous leadership is rare, I can only imagine in the sphere of law where you can have team members, lawyers who are advocating for what might not be approved to be the right thing, especially in our mindset as Christians and knowing like what we believe and follow. And even like a workspace, a professional space where you're working with other CEOs, CFOs, things like that, where they are not in the business of doing good, more so even unethical at some point. How can you combat that where you want to be the change and you want to stand up for what's right, but other execs are not in the business of doing that?
Sometimes it's a very good question, not easily answered, but sometimes there are ways you can work within an organization to help incrementally with things. Obviously, you need to keep your moral center and code, or you're lost, you're done. And there are going to be times where you find out, I can't continue working in this company, in this environment, because it's a level that I can't live with. I have fired clients before because they wanted me to do something unethical, and I'm not going to do it. They can find someone else, and it's up to them. But I would say it's not easy, but be firm in what you will and will not do for yourself. And then encourage positive change where you can, but recognize where you can't. And it really kind of goes back to the Alcoholics Anonymous thing about how does it go again? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And it comes down to that. So, yeah, does that help? Yeah, okay. Anybody? Oh, yes. I did. I like how you phrase that most effectively, because there's no perfect way. There is no perfect way. I have lost friends. But there are a couple things. Yes. There are a couple things. One is, and I have a conscience buddy to say, look, your social media posts are getting out of hand. I have a couple that will do that. Say, Melody, let it go. You're not convincing anybody. And I think realizing you're not going to convince anybody of things via social media. Odds are you're not going to. If you can plant a seed. And so what I try to do, not always effectively, but what I try to do is plant a seed of thought. Have you thought about looking at it this way? Have you thought about this? And so, trying to do that. And then the other thing is realizing there's some things you just can't talk about with some people because it's not going to work. I think we need to very much deliberately open up circles where we can actually talk about difficult things in a non-judgment manner and not picking sides. I mean, look at some of the issues that we have struggled over with as a country for many years. Abortion is a big one. Gun control, another one. Let's reframe those conversations, and instead of having people on one side or another, sit down and talk about the various different facets. Why do some people like guns? Why do some people hate them? What are pros and cons of different kinds of regulation? Let's talk about all of those and then go home and think about it. Don't take a vote. Go home and think about it, and sort of expanding minds and understanding some conversations you can't have with some people. Anyone else? Yes.
I just wanted to say I really appreciated just how you gave examples of different types of leadership, and I think that it's so easy to realize that, a leader isn't just someone who sits up front and talks to people. But I just was wondering, what are some ways that you intentionally try and show your faith in the workplace?
I think for me, I haven't been, I try very much not to be in your face about any of that. I try to be more low-key. I like to see, I have had several clients who have told me, you're too honest. And I take that as a badge of, I'm doing something right. I am a trial attorney, and I'm, partner level, and yet I don't have the fancy house or fancy car because I haven't made those compromises that it would take to get that. So I hope people just kind of can see that I try to be a decent person in my interactions with people every day instead of saying why I do it. And then, I also try to gauge with the particular client where they are. So the one case I was talking about with Church State Council, that's a client that I have had prayers with before her deposition. When we were in settlement conference, we've had actual prayers together because we both had Christian faith, and so it made sense in the context. But if I have clients that are not that, I'm not going to initiate that. That's a different thing. So that's what I kind of try to do. It's sort of, I'd like them to see my Christian faith by how I act as opposed to what I say.
Can we give Melody another round of applause? Alrighty, so I have just a few things to say. First and foremost, all of the sessions have been recorded and will be posted online eventually. And in addition to that, can we give Andrew a round of applause? He's our guy who's really helped us with this. I know everyone appreciates him. And then we just want to say another thank you to Jody and to Lisa, as they are one of, at least for our class, they were huge helps in making sure this all worked. Alrighty, and then we have trash cans in the back if you could make sure to throw your stuff away, and then we have cookies on the plates or on the tables. Thank you guys so much for coming. We really appreciate it.